topics related to the classification, continuation of the previous video, identifying and describing new species. Classification provides a system for naming and describing new species that are discovered. This allows scientists to communicate effectively about different species and their characteristics. Understanding relationships among organisms. Classification helps to reveal the evolutionary relationships among organisms. By grouping organisms with similar characteristics, scientists can infer relationships among them and develop hypotheses about their evolutionary history. Scientists can infer relationships among them and develop hypotheses about their evolutionary history. So, providing a framework for future research. Classification provides a framework for organizing and studying the diversity of life. This can lead to the discovery of new species, the development of new hypotheses about the evolutionary relationships among organisms, and the identification of areas of research that are in need of future further study. Then, facilitating communication and education. Classification provides a common language for scientists and educators to communicate about different species and their characteristics. It also provides non scientists to understand and appreciate the diversity of life on Earth. Then, examples of how classification achieves these objectives include binomial nomenclature. The use of a two-part name, genus and species, to identify each species allows scientists to communicate unambiguously about different species and their characteristics. Then, phylogenetic trees. These diagrams represent the evolutionary relationships among different groups of organisms and can help scientists develop hypotheses about the evolutionary history of different species. Then, taxonomic keys. These tools help identify organisms by asking a series of questions about their characteristics and using a system of binary choices to narrow down the possibilities until a species is identified. Then, field guides. These books provide a quick reference for identifying species in the field. They typically include descriptions of the key characteristics of different species, photographs or illustrations, and information on the species habitat and geographic range. Overall, the objectives of classification are to provide a system for organizing and studying the diversity of life, to understand the relationships among different organisms, and to facilitate communication and education about the natural world. Communication, identification, and evolutionary relationships, conservation purpose, then classification, education, research field, economic importance, biodiversity conservation, then predictive power, along with comparative studies, then taxonomic stability, conservation and management, some topics of historical reconstruction and identification and discovery. Next, about taxonomic collections and the process of identification. Taxonomic collections are the process of identification play crucial roles in field of taxonomy and systematics. Taxonomic collections and the process of identification play crucial roles in the field of taxonomy and systematics. Let's explore these topics in detail. So, taxonomic collections. Taxonomic collections are repositories of preserved specimens that represent the biodiversity of various organisms. These collections can include preserved specimens of plants, animals, fungi, and other organisms. They serve as valuable resources for taxonomists and researchers, providing a wealth of information about the diversity, distribution, and characteristics of different species. Then, importance of taxonomic collections. Reference material. Taxonomic collections serve as a reference for accurate identification of species. They provide physical specimens that researchers can examine to study the morphology, anatomy, and other characteristics of organisms. Then, documentation of biodiversity. Collections help document and preserve the diversity of various regions. They provide a record of species that can be used for scientific studies, conservation efforts, and monitoring changes in ecosystems. Then, research and discovery. Taxonomic collections enable new discoveries by allowing scientists to compare and study specimens from different regions and time periods. They can reveal new species, variations within species, and important evolutionary patterns. Then, verification of taxonomic work. Collections serve as evidence for taxonomic descriptions and revisions. They provide a physical record of species, ensuring the accuracy and reliability of taxonomic studies. Then, conservation and management. Taxonomic collections aid in the conservation and management of biodiversity. They help identify threatened or endangered species, monitor changes in population, and provide a basis for conservation planning. Types of taxonomic collections. Herbaria. Collection of preserved plant specimens, including preserved pressed plants, seeds, and wood samples. Then zoological collections of preserved animal specimens, including skins, skeletons, mounted specimens, and DNA samples. Then culture collections of microorganisms, including bacteria, fungi, and algae, maintained for research and industrial purposes. Then seed banks, collections of seeds from different plant species, often stored under controlled conditions for conservation and research. Then cryobanks, collections of frozen tissues, gametes, or embryos, typically used for preserving genetic diversity and rare species. Then process of identification. Identification is the process of determining the species or taxonomic group to which an organism belongs. It involves careful examination and comparison of an organism's characteristics with known references or keys. The processes can vary depending on the organism and available resources, but generally follows these steps like observation. The organism is observed and its key characteristics are noted, such as size, shape, color, and specific anatomical features. Then collection of diagnostic features. Specific diagnostic features that are unique to a particular group of species are identified. These features may include external morphology, internal structure, behavior, or genetic markers. Then comparison and reference. The observed characteristics are compared to reference materials such as taxonomic keys, field guides, literature, or museum collections. Similarities and differences are noted to determine the closest match. Then consultation and expertise. In challenging cases, experts in the specific taxonomy group may be consulted to assist with the identification. They provide specialized knowledge and experience to confirm or refine the identification. Then documentation. The identification results are documented, including the species name, supporting characteristics, and any additional notes or comments. Then verification. In some cases, additional techniques like DNA analysis or specialized microscopy may be used to confirm the identification. Identification is an iterative process, often requiring multiple iterations and the consideration of different characteristics and data sources to arrive at a confident identification. So overall, taxonomic collections and the process of identification are essential components of taxonomy and systematics. They provide a foundation for understanding and documenting biodiversity, enable scientific research, support conservation efforts, and facilitate accurate species identification. Then taxonomic collections, types of collections. Taxonomic collections are repositories of preserved specimens that represent the diversity of organisms. These collections play a vital role in taxonomy, systematics, and various fields of biological research. So herbaria is there. Herbaria are collections of preserved plant specimens. We learned like these specimens typically consist of pressed and dried plant specimens mounted on sheets. They include leaves, flowers, fruits, and other plant parts, along with information about the collection location, date, and collector. Herbaria serve as valuable references for studying plant taxonomy, distribution, and ecology. They are particularly important for identifying and documenting plant species diversity. Then zoological collections. Zoological collections house preserved animal specimens. These collections include a wide range of specimens such as skins, skeletons, mounted specimens, eggs, and DNA samples. Zoological collections are essential for studying animal diversity, morphology, anatomy, and evolutionary relationships. They aid in species identification, taxonomy, ecological research, and conservation efforts. Then insect collections. Insect collections focus specifically on preserving and studying insects. They include specimens from various insect orders such as beetles, butterflies, bees, flies, and ants. Insect collections contribute to the understanding of insect taxonomy, morphology, behavior, and ecology interactions. They are used for species identification, evolutionary studies, pest management, and biodiversity conservation. Then fish collections. Fish collections consist of preserved fish specimens, including whole specimens, skeletons, or tissue samples. They provide valuable resources for studying fish taxonomy, morphology, systematics, and distribution patterns. Fish collections aid in specific species identification, conservation assessments, fisheries management, and the understanding of fish evolution and ecology. Then bird collections. Bird collections are dedicated to preserving bird specimens. They contain mounted bird specimens, study skins, feathers, nests, and eggs. Bird collections are crucial for studying avian diversity, distribution, migration patterns, behavior, and evolutionary relationships. They support research on bird taxonomy, ecology, conservation, and ornithology. Then mammal collections. Mammal collections preserve mammalian species, including skins, skulls, skeletons, and tissue samples. They provide important resources for studying mammalian taxonomy, morphology, evolutionary history, and ecological interactions. So mammal collections aid in species identification, conservation assessments, ecological research, and understanding mammal diversity and adaptations. Then culture collections are there. Culture collections consist of living microorganisms including bacteria, fungi, algae, and protists. They maintain strains of microorganisms for research, industrial applications, and medical purposes. Culture collections provide resources for studying microbial diversity, genetics, and applications in various fields including medicine, agriculture, and biotechnology. These are some major types of taxonomy collections. Each collection type serves as a valuable resource for scientific research, education, species identification, conservation, and the documentation of biodiversity. These collections contribute to our understanding of the natural world and provide a foundation for further studies in taxonomy, systematics, and related fields. Then, taxonomy collections, value of collection, purpose of scientific collection. Taxonomic taxonomic collections hold significant value in scientific research, and they serve several purposes in field of taxonomy and systematics. Species documentation and identification. Taxonomy collections provide a comprehensive record of species diversity. They serve as a repository of preserved specimens that can be examined and compared to identify and document species accurately. These collections are essential for taxonomy, enabling scientists to describe new species, revise existing classifications, and identify specimens based on morphological or genetic characteristics. Then, reference for comparative studies. Taxonomy collections serve as references for comparative studies. Scientists can examine specimens from different regions, time periods, or taxonomic groups to understand variation, evolutionary relationships, and adaptations. By comparing specimens, researchers gain insight into the diversity, ecology, and behavior of organisms. Then, biodiversity documentation and conservation. Taxonomy collections play a vital role in documenting and conserving biodiversity. They provide evidence for species occurrence, distribution patterns, and ecological associations. This information helps in assessing the status of endangered species, understanding habitat preferences, and designing effective conservation strategies. Then, historical research and long-term monitoring. Taxonomic collections provide a historical record of species diversity. By examining specimens collected in the past, researchers can track changes in species distribution, detect species introductions or extinctions, and study the effects of environmental changes over time. These collections enable long term monitoring of biodiversity and contribute to our understanding of ecological dynamics. Then, research and discovery. Taxonomy collections are a valuable resource for scientific research. They facilitate studies on various aspects of organism, including morphology, anatomy, physiology, behavior, and genetics. Researchers can access specimens to conduct experiments, genetic analysis, and other investigations to advance our knowledge of the natural world. Then, educational and outreach activities. Taxonomy collections have educational value, serving as teaching resources for students, scientists, and the general public. They provide hands on opportunities to study biodiversity, learn about species identification, and understand the importance of conservation. So, collections often form the basis for natural history exhibits, museum displays, and educational programs. So, verification and validation of taxonomic work. Taxonomic collections play a crucial role in the verification and validation of the taxonomic research. Specimens serve as physical evidence for taxonomic descriptions, revisions, and classifications. They enable other researchers to examine and inform taxonomic identifications, ensuring the accuracy and reliability of scientific work. Then, preservation of genetic resources. Taxonomic collections contribute to the preservation of genetic resources. Specimens, especially those stored in specialized facilities like cryobanks like cold storage like settings, can provide a source of genetic material for future studies, including DNA sequencing, population genetics, and conservation genetics. So, overall, taxonomic collections have immense value for scientific research, species identification, biodiversity conservation, and education. They serve as a rich source of information, allowing scientists to explore and understand the diversity, evolution, and biological roles of organisms. Taxonomic collections are invaluable assets for advancing our knowledge of the natural world and informing conservation efforts. Thank you for listening.